Beyond the headlines. This is World Insight.
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. U.S. President Donald Trump arrived in Beijing for his state visit to China. Trump said he's looking forward to the trip and expects great things to happen during his visit. It's the first in-person meeting between the two presidents since their meeting in Busan last October, and the very first visit by a U.S. president in almost 9 years. Expectations are running high as we speak, and here is my latest take. Chinese and U.S. presidents are meeting this week. It's an opportunity that both countries and the world should not miss. Over the past year and a half, the two countries have endured multiple rounds of wrestling, from tariff wars and export controls to technological rivalry. It's clear that the relationship was not, is not, and will not be a winner-takes-all type, but one that requires both to coordinate for a win-win while shaping the evolving world order. Of course, no one is naive enough today to throw out a few slogans to solve problems. Compared to 9 years ago when President Trump made his first visit to China, both sides now have figured out that the most efficient way forward is to acknowledge reality, each other's capacities, and based on that, move relations forward, one step at a time. After all, what needed to be argued has already been argued. What needed to be discussed has already been discussed. The red lines and bottom cards of both sides have been laid almost entirely bare on the table. Springtime in Beijing is not just marked by fully blossoming Chinese roses along the major roads, which makes the city a huge rose garden, but also a blossoming Chinese economy, spearheaded by innovation and ever more partnerships with the rest of the world. It's no longer a tech follower, but what some in the U.S. call a peer competitor. Yet China prefers to call it a better self, be it in artificial intelligence and applications, electronic vehicles, robotics, pharmaceuticals, high-speed rail, batteries, and clean energy. In one word, more room for cooperation than rivalry. This is a conclusion reached after years of strategic maneuvering, to put it politely, efforts and rhetoric of decoupling and severing supply chains between the two nations since Trump's second term started. The result? More from both sides understand now the two economy structures are more complementary than ever before, with each having unique comparative advantages. So you see, relatively equal footing means coordination and cooperation are better choices, not confrontations. The top leaders are leading the rest of the countries forward on a new stage of interaction. The Busan summit last year was a crystallization of it, and both sides have established and maintained mechanisms for more grounded work and for more frequent communication and coordination, but, of course, not enough. Given the huge needs on both sides, such as trade and investment, as well as other issues related to what China calls international peace and development, the rising challenges of AI governance as technological development reaches a critical stage, increasing conflicts worldwide are having their dampening effects on all economies, first and foremost, emerging geographical choke points preventing the long-standing flow of energy and trade. Of course, none of these will be easy, as trust is still a luxury in bilateral relations. Many things have to be pushed forward, even when suspicion, misunderstandings, and risk are present. Yet both sides must move forward. President Trump is showcasing his political capabilities to his voters. China has a parallel need to secure the space and resources for its own development and to create more common ground for the world to move on. So in the top leaders' discussion, one could expect pragmatic issues related to purchasing products at reasonable prices for mutual cooperation, as well as the reiteration of core national interests. Even more importantly, many see this opportunity as a time for leaders of the two largest economies of the world to open a conversation about potentially more fundamental questions. What kind of relationship should exist between China and the U.S.? Starting from what channels and mechanisms can be set up to deal with immediate issues and preparing for the longer ones.
Beyond the headlines. This is World Insight.
Both China and the U.S. are global leaders in artificial intelligence, one of the most transformative cutting-edge technologies. Can the two countries reach a more cooperative approach to AI development, especially given the latest advancements in the technology? And could the upcoming leaders' meeting address critical AI governance issue? Let's loop in our panelists. Cyrus Holtz, founder of AI Safety Connect and co-founder of Stability AI. Zheng Yi, founding dean of Beijing Institute of AI Safety and Governance. And Mu Mingpu, professor and academic director at the Chinese Academy of Sciences. The latest development, for example, with OpenAI's ChatGPT 5.4 Cyber and also Anthropic's missiles, many wonder what others predicted about what AI's capabilities might be in years. In fact, according to some experts, it's already right in front of us. And as a result of that, how far is the AI governance lagging behind the latest technological improvement of artificial intelligence?
Well, that's a very great question. The fact of the matter is that, the celerity and the pace of the advancement of this frontier technology is astounding us, even the creators, right? So our institutions are, at times hundreds, if not millennia, the way they're being set. They're not being set right now for the celerity and the advancement of these capabilities. But the Mythos moment is an important one because someone without any coding experience could run around software, running, banks, running hospitals, running grids, and find vulnerabilities there and exploit them. So even a kid without any coding experience could do that with Mythos. So this is kind of like a wake-up call.
So the question really is AI governance cooperation. How far is it from us today? How much willingness and determination is there? For example, between the biggest AI powers, China and the United States. Cyrus, your thoughts?
Now, I think this White House realized that we have, again, to sit at the table. So there's clear signals that is giving us hope that we can sit together, particularly around governance of what is called catastrophic and systemic risk, right? The most dangerous risk that autonomous system could unleash into a network or into societies. So I believe the time is right now for this type of discussion. The fact that China has the president of the APEC this year, which is a track one dialogue, right? When the U.S. and the Chinese at the highest level. Next week, we're going to see that, sit in the room, that give us hope that we can get into this global governance discussion.
Yi, what about from China's side? How much determination and willingness is there to cooperate on AI governance?
I would say from the China side, starting from the very beginning, we always say we need a commonly agreed framework for international collaboration on mutually guarantee safety for AI. So this is starting from the very beginning, like 7 years ago when we talk about AI safety in the first place in China. Well, on the other side, at this point, not all the countries can keep track of this necessity, and there are consensus, but there are no steps, concrete steps to take it forward.
Cyrus, willing to cooperate vis-a-vis actions of cooperation, those are two very different things. Remember 2024, you talk about that at APEC's economic leaders meeting between the two presidents of China and the United States. They talk about that not let AI to control the eventual nuclear weapon decision. That it was what is decided then. But the level of AI technology at that time was very different from what it is today. So whether there is going to be still strong willingness to cooperate, and not only on that field, but also in many other fields, because AI is everywhere now. So what do you think about that?
We don't want to allow humans, whether it's individual actors or state actors, to develop nuclear weapons or biological weapons or radiological weapons. Leveraging AI system is something that is very much on the table. That is a discussion that is ongoing between the U.S. and China, and that gives us hope that we can expand this discussion towards the advanced capabilities that these systems are bringing about. And the two main things are this new discussion that should be centered around, should be around loss of control of very powerful systems, that we are currently all developing in the labs in the US and in China, both, right? So loss of control is one thing. The other discussion is alignment, right? Making sure that this system are indeed acting the way you want them to act and getting toward the goal that you are stating to them. So these are the two issues that needs to be on the table.
Yeah.
And we see with the advancement of the capabilities, again, Mythos is a case in point, that this is becoming real, right? This is not more science fiction anymore.
Some have been suggesting, while the analogy of how the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty was signed decades ago can be an interesting example for now, at least. But of course, these two things are very different. One is very specialized field. The other is infiltrated, AI now infiltrated into everywhere. So these are similar but different.
The analogy holds, particularly within the track 2 part of it, right? Mm-hmm. So you had the Pugwash conferences that have helped, since 1957, you had scientists, nuclear scientists, from the Soviet Union, from China, and the US and Europe meeting together and having discussions, right? So that is the same kind of work that Professor Zhang and myself are promoting, between the East and the West. That's the work that we're doing with AI Safety Connect. That's the work that the Beijing AI Safety Institute is also engaged with, is having discussion within scientists, from different frontier labs, mm-hmm. and preparing the way, paving the way for the discussion that are upcoming, from the political leaders. So I would say in that sense, the track to history and the track to discussion that have allowed the treaties on non-proliferation in nuclear domain is quite valid.
Yeah. But there's quite an urgency because non-proliferation treaty, when it was signed, the nuclear technologies has been gradually developing, but now it is already in front of us, the AI technological innovation. So Yi, your thoughts on this? Is that relevant, that analogy?
I think it's very, very relevant in a positive way. So what I see is that, so what is the commonality? Actually, is it really about the danger of the technology? That's very similar. It will create a catastrophic or even existential risk to humanity. So that is the similar part. Well, on the other side is very hard to control. So this is why they are very similar. And the solutions, actually, we need to learn a lesson from this nuclear scenario, that what we need to do. We need to have a scientific sound and policy-wise plausible solutions, action-oriented solutions before disaster happens. Right. So this is why both me and Cyrus is putting so much emphasis on putting frontier scientists all together to think about potential risks right there and to predict when it will happen, and then to get prepared, because later is too late. Right. So we need to learn a lesson from that.
But let's be pragmatic here.
Right.
We are seeing countries are running as much as they can in a speed to get the AI supremacy, whether it's in pragmatic application format or it is in, AGI and also super intelligence, so to speak. And therefore, the question is not about how much they can cooperate, but rather how to find the place in which both sides feel the necessity to cooperate without compromising what they consider as their advantage over the others or the other.
Yeah.
So that is crucial, isn't it?
To me, I don't see that as a competition, because if you wanted to create the first AGI, okay, many people wanted to do this, or many countries, but what if you're creating a monster? Who wanted to create a monster? No one wanted to create the first monster, right? So I think both China and the United States wanted to get benefit from AGI, but with their expectation is that it's a very efficient, powerful tool that help them to win, but not a monster that will destroy themselves as well. So what I see about the cooperation on safety and governance is to ensure to have a steady and fast development of AGI. But bear in mind, the cooperation on AI safety and governance is to ensure no one is creating monster.
All right. Cyrus, your thoughts on that?
I 100% agree. I mean, this notion of a race to AGI is a very silly notion, right? So there is no finish line there, right? So, and whoever builds a first superintelligence is going to lose control of the superintelligence. For the time being, we don't know. Not one single lab, not one single researcher know how to control intelligence that has capabilities, cognitive capabilities that are 1,000 times or 1 million times superior than ours, right? So the control part is going to be impossible. Right now, the discussion that we need to have, and hopefully that we will have, is about slowing down this crazy pace toward this monster that he is talking about that we won't be able to control, right?
That's what you believe, Cyrus, about slowing down the speed. But this is not what the private sector, for example, has been working on. They are doing exactly the opposite. They are racing to be the first, whether you call it monster or the other way around. So that's what I'm saying, that how can you get different stakeholders to cooperate without making them feel they are compromising their advantages? Only that and the urgency and shared danger would let them to come to the table together, isn't it, Cyrus?
At the last Davos summit, both Demis Hassabis, the leader of Google DeepMind, and Dario Almode, the leader of Anthropic, have both called for a pause, right? They both said, we wish we could slow down.
Yes, they did. And yet nobody slowed down. So that's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Rhetoric is one
that's
thing.
Why we need leaders to sit together, right? That's why we need both our presidents to sit together and agree upon, frameworks where we can have safe development of the system that are, bottom line, the monster analogy is relevant, but bottom line, the system could be extremely beneficial for mankind, right? Providing we know how to harness them properly.
Before jumping into the studio, I was also reading with two documents on my table. One is a book written by Henry Kissinger, Eric Schmidt, Craig Mundy, called Genesis, talking about AI and how is it likely to shape the world beyond our imagination sometimes. And also the other thing is China's AI governance initiative, which China raised to the international community as a contribution for a global governance a few years ago. What it shows actually is common ground that both sides, strategic minds, have long realized the importance and significance of this. It's just whether their call will ever lead to real action, especially actions from both sides.
Global AI governance initiative that you mentioned in the first place is from a China contribution trying to have positive inputs to global consensus. So global consensus is a step forward. Well, China didn't stop there. Actually, now what we're building is to provide concrete solutions and actions, as you said. One of the examples is recently China released the National AI Scientific Ethics Review policy that all sensitive AI services has to do a AI ethics review in the first place before release. Well, on the other side, it's about AI safety actions. Now, institutions like Beijing Institute of AI Safety and Governance and also the Shanghai AI Lab were building safety guardrails and frameworks and provided freely to the general public. This is the actions. And also the most recent trying is China Cyberspace Administration of China that they released the interim measures of anthropomorphic AI services. So they didn't allow to provide inappropriate services to the youngs on anthropomorphic AI services. That's very important. These are all AI actions. So we need to unify knowing and actions.
In November 2023, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has convened the first World AI Safety Summit, right? So that has carried on in Seoul. Unfortunately, in France, when France took the presidency of the summit, Macron decided to take safety out of the scope and focus on action, right? And investment and action. So I think this is kind of a missed opportunity. We should refocus this gathering that we had that included China, right? That included frontier labs from both sides of the Atlantic. We need this mechanism to be put back in place.
China, United States want to compare notes about what's the best policy. The US better have someone too, right?
To be very concrete, what could happen there is to have, joint evaluation exercise, joint verification exercise, what is called governance of GPUs, verification mechanisms to understand where the compute power is being built, what is being used for, what are the thresholds. So these are very, very concrete steps that policymakers could put in place. But it only boils down to the two superpowers of AI, right?
How to avoid that real AI governance discussion will be taken advantage by eventually blocks and also export controls and taboos coming from both sides against each other. That's how things are not going to be done in the name of AI governance cooperation and yet to serve a very different purpose.
Well, I'm also a VC, right? So we invest in solutions that are toward AI safety. Part of these solutions that we're seeing is around compute governance. So the technological solution exists. It necessitates now some kind of willpower from the policymakers.
Tell me more about what can make actions happen.
Let's say we had these COP meetings for 30 times. Well, I think it's COP 31st this year. These COP meetings, there are a lot of principles agreed upon. There are a lot of consensus. But the point is whether the government has the will to carry out those consensus. And without government's will to implement this consensus, it's very difficult. Let's talk about this situation. Now, we have two superpowers in AI. The only way to have this work is some government, but presumably China or United States, decided we are going to set up our own guardrails and AI governance and show the people in the world how to do it. In this case, it's the tech giants in the Silicon Valleys who are willing to do this. I think in the early discussion when large language model came out, there are a lot of agreements that we should immediately have some sort of governance, but this voice has disappeared, essentially. And the U.S. government shows no intention at this moment to actually form a national policy on the AI governance.
That sounds perfect, but Professor Pu, have you ever thought about this? I mean, what you're talking about mainly is AI safety, things that are not necessarily related to national security or the defense industry.
Yes.
However, it is, some would say, it is exactly in the defense industry that's where the danger is. So are you suggesting we can only do part of the job, not necessarily the whole job when it comes to AI governance?
The mechanism has to be established to implement or act on those developers or people who use the AI in the wrong way. And then once that mechanism is developed, then it could be openly shared to all developers or all users around the world, because there's no consensus that everybody agree to act together, right? So that's for example, I always like to go back to the COP discussion, COP conferences.
But does that work?
I think we need a common framework taking both military and non-military applications. So for military applications, actually at the back for the foundational models, the engines, they're from non-military.
Right.
So that means when you build non-military foundational models, you need to keep an eye on potential malicious use and abuse, the possibilities of being abused, and then to protect from the foundational model perspective in the first place, so that they will not be that easy to be proliferated, to be evil used. So this is why we cannot divide these two domains, but to, as you suggested, to put them into a holistic framework and to take care of both safety and security perspective altogether.
I think, going back to trust and verification, Sam Altman during the last summit in New Delhi, what was supposed to be the AI Safety Summit, that was the AI Impact Summit back then, but he called for an IEA for AI, right? An International Atomic Energy Agency for AI, but what does it mean? Going back to the parallel between nuclear and that, IEA has been set up by the United Nations, but it worked because they had verification and proven verification mechanisms that were put in place to understand who's developing nuclear, in different parts of the world. We need to have, so the idea is very valid. The idea could work only if the US and China agree upon it. And we can also bring, middle powers, etc. But, around hardware verification, around compute verification, GPUs and various algorithms that are being used by the system, such an agency or such a project or initiative could be extremely, extremely valuable.
That's all we have for today's discussion on World Insight. I'm Tian Wei.